Hey guys, okay, so you want to basically create or mimic these, let's say, fashion illustrations. So basically this tutorial is going to show you how I created these range of designs and created basically the outlines and also the design details to then turn them into illustrations that we can then obviously color up, and we can add details and textures and all kinds of things. So we're taking hand-drawn sketches and we're turning them into these outlines with design details such as the paneling, and then we're going to be transforming them into fully colored leggings. And we've got a few different options as well. So I'll show you how to do that. So basically, first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Adobe Illustrator. Now, I'm a massive fan of Preta-Template. They do fantastic online templates which are fully editable in Adobe Illustrator. You just simply go to the website, find the template you're looking for, and then you can download it, and yeah, here it is. So basically, these are my illustrations of my leggings that I've created. As you can see, they're all fully editable, which is great. You know, you can change the colors, play around them, do whatever you want to do. Well, basically, we've built these using these Preta-Template templates. I'm not sure if you can see, but look, in the background here, there's actually a template there. Well, to start things off, before we start drafting our leggings, I want to make my leggings the main event. In other words, I want them to fill my page. This pack comes with three. We have a side image, we have a front and a back, but also the leggings are going to look quite small, and it means we're going to have to do some design work for the top area to make it look like a real illustration. So I want to transform this template into something that looks a little bit more like this. And I'll show you that actually. Let's just zoom out quickly. So I'm going to just remove those layers. Okay, so as you can see, this is kind of what I'm looking for. It makes my life much easier when it comes to designing and presenting my work. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go to the Preta template here, and I'm going to get my small selection tool. Okay, it's called the direct selection tool. It's the white one. You can hit A on your keyboard to select it. Now this basically selects individual elements, which is really handy when it comes to picking up, let's say, for example, this model here, and maybe we don't want that leg or maybe the foot either. We can just select this one image. But anyway, so if I use the big selection tool, which is this one here, and it's V on your keyboard, if I click on it, you see we get the whole thing, which is really annoying. I can't really do much with that. So we go to our small selection tool, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply, you know what, I don't want this side one, so I'm going to click and drag with my small selection tool, click and drag, and so these lines have been selected. I'm going to hit backspace on my keyboard a few times, not just once, but a few times. If you don't hit it more than once, then you're going to end up with like little dots all over the place. I'll show you. So if I get this line here and I delete it once, you see we've got a whole bunch of like little dots floating around, which is really annoying. So we just want to make sure that we hit backspace a few times, and that way it's nice and clean. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply get my small selection tool once again. I'm going to click and drag over this lady here, and I'm going to move her off to the side. In fact, you know what? No, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go edit, and I'm going to go cut, and then I'm going to go edit and then paste. Now what that does is that separates it from the existing template, and what I'm also going to do is go object and then group. So now when I use the big selection tool, you see it's just one is selected. So this one was originally locked to the Preta-Template template. You see if I move that around, it moves. However, this one, because I've selected it with the small selection key, small selection tool, and I've basically taken it, or let's say cut it from that template, when I paste it in again, it's its own complete image, completely removed from this template. And then all I'm going to do is simply go object and then group. Okay, and that means when I use my big selection tool, I can then simply click and drag. Which is great. We'll do exactly the same for this one, because once again, look, it's locked to that behind layer. So I'm going to get my small selection tool, click and drag over that area there. You want to make sure you don't get these boxes in either. It might be a little bit tricky. So let's just click and drag over the whole area. And you know what we have? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the Shift and the Alt key on my keyboard, and I'm going to click this a few times, and it should actually click it. You should click it until you see it's been removed. Basically, Shift Alt click, what it does is it removes selections and it queues up selections. Okay, so just want to make sure that you can. There we go. So we're just selecting and unselecting various parts of it. I'm just going to go edit and then go cut, and then go edit and then paste, and then once again object, and I'm going to group it. If I don't group it, so I haven't grouped that, you can see that it's in pieces. It's a bit of a mess. I can't really use it. I can't really move it around, whereas this one's been grouped. So what we do is we make sure we've, well, let's just get rid of it. Let's just paste it in, and we're going to go object and then group, and that just simply means when we have our big selection tool, we can just simply move that around and it's one complete piece, which is fabulous. Okay, so next what I'm going to do is I'm going to place these two side by side. Okay, they're looking fab. Let's just zoom out a little bit. So what I want to do is focus mainly on this bottom half. Also to focus to zoom in and zoom out, hold down the Command key on your keyboard, plus Command plus to zoom in, and Command minus to move out. So what I want to do with these two is basically enlarge them. Okay, I want to enlarge them so I'm just looking at the waist to floor here. However, you see if I enlarge them, so sorry, let me just show you. So if I go to Big Selection Tool and I click and drag over these two items, I have this expandable or transform box in the corner here. Now if I click and drag, I can try my hardest to try and scale them properly, but at the end of the day it's a free transform, so I can make them quite wide, I can make them very, very tall. So if you want to make sure you scale them proportionately, all you do is hold down the Shift key and it will lock it. You see? It locks it to make sure they're to scale. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move that up until the waistline's just below that Prêt-à-Template sign. And let's just nudge it down. With the arrow keys on your keyboard, you can actually nudge this and move it around. Whatever your selection is, you can move it around with the arrow keys on your keyboard. And if you want to do big changes or big nudges, hold down the Shift key and the arrow key. See? Arrow. So holding down the Shift key, you can go up and down with the arrow keys and it's a far greater move. So that's the normal move, and that's holding down Shift. Okay, so that's lovely. So now we've expanded this kind of area here, that's brilliant, but we've got all of this guff above here, it's kind of covering the Prêt-à-Template logo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a clipping mask that will contain this information. So I'm going to go to my square tool, I'm just going to click and drag. So let's say the top of my page is going to be about there, I want it to cut off at about this area. I'm just going to click and drag over that entire area to make sure I get the whole of those mannequins in. And you can see that I want to just have this area here inside the box. So once you've created your square, just click off, go to your Big Selection tool, click off, and now what we're going to do is I'm going to select all of those objects there. Sorry, let's do that again. Let's take the box. I'm going to hold down my Shift key and click on this model, and then hold down the Shift key and click on this model. This just queues up my selections. And I'm going to go to Object, where is it? Make clipping mask. Here we go. So I'm going to go to Object and then Clipping Mask and then Make. I normally use these little shortcuts, so that would be Command 7 for me, but I'm going to show you how to find these in the actual menu as well. So Clipping Mask and then Make. And what it does is it creates a clipping mask, which essentially all it does is it shows. So the stuff's still there, as you can see, it's still there, but it's only being displayed in this box, which essentially is the clipping mask. Yeah, so that's a really important, useful tool that will help you a great deal. Okay, so now I pretty much have, here we go, I pretty much have this concept, and it's looking great. But obviously, on this page, there is one thing, these lines are actually very, very grey. I want them to be a little bit slightly more transparent, because I don't want them to get in the way too much. I want to work on my leggings block or my leggings illustration without having to worry too much about these lines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my magic wand tool, which is here. You can even press Y on the keyboard to bring this up. And I'm just going to click on this line. Now we're getting a lot of different lines here, which is slightly annoying. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on this magic wand, and it will bring up the dialog box, and here I'm going to tick all of these, and I'm going to make sure they're all 0, and then I'm going to click on my grey lines, and finally you can see that it's only picked up the lines of the same colour, the same thickness, the same weight, everything. So I'm not picking up these invisible lines or the binding box or all these little bits as well. I'm just picking up this bit here. So the magic wand allows you to select elements of the same nature. You can change these values to allow certain tolerances. For example, if this had a fill colour of green, if there were similar, let's say, boxes or similar elements that had a similar green colour, it would pick it up depending on the tolerance. But if you set everything to 0, it will only go for that absolute specific colour, line width, etc. So let's just get rid of that. So what I'm going to do here is, you can see we have the colour palettes. So you have the fill and you have the stroke. If I double click on the stroke, you'll see it brings up the colour picker. And in here what I can do is I can just simply make this as light as I want it. So if I click OK, that might be too light. Whoa, I can barely see it. So let's just go back. You can go Edit and then Undo if you want to go back. So let's go to that again and let's make it ever so slightly lighter, but not too light. Still not quite happy with that. Let's make it even lighter. Just enough so I can see it. That is perfect. I hope you can see that on your screen. That's looking great. Okay, so now we've pretty much prepped our template when it comes to our designs. You can actually print this out and do some hand sketches on the top of this as well, because obviously this template is a little bit cleaner, it's larger, it has all the focuses on your leggings. Also, let's just get rid of this down here. We don't need this anymore. Get rid of that as well. Okay, oops, I actually deleted my clipping mask. Shouldn't do that. I want to get rid of this, but I don't want to lose these lines. So there we go. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to start creating the outline of our leggings. Okay, so really simple. To start actually creating the outline for my leggings, what I want to do is create some layers. Okay, the layers allow you to, let's say, design details that you can then remove, you can replace, you can change the color of. It keeps your illustration really clean and neat. And what I'll do is I'll show you as we go along, because it's a little bit harder to explain than it is to just show you. So first of all, we're going to rename this layer. And also, first of all, if you can't find the layers thing or the layers palette on the right hand column here, just go to Window, have a scroll down, and then click Layers, and it will appear just here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on this text. I'm going to call this the template layer. Okay, perfect. And then what I'm doing is I'm going to create a new layer by clicking on this one, this little element just here. And I'm going to call this the outline layer. And this is going to go at the very top, which is great. Also, look, I can actually hide these if I want to. I can even lock them as well. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lock this layer. And the reason why is so I can't actually edit it or play around with it. You see, look, if I don't have it locked, oh, it's going to be a pain. I'm going to move it around and it's going to get in my way. So I'm going to lock that completely, which means none of it is selectable, which is really helpful. So now I'm going to click on my outline layer. You must select the layer that you want to work on. And so this is my outline layer. So let's actually start drawing. So here we're going to start looking at the pen tools. So if we go to, as you can see here, we have a few different pen options. If for some reason you can't see any of these three or these, let's say, 4 items here, just simply go into your dots. And then from here you should be able to add those on the side. For example, the pen tool. Okay, so draw, we have them here, and all you do is simply click and drag them. So there we go, we can click and just drag that onto there, and you can see that we can add them, which is great. Okay, let's click off that. So what I want to do is, let's just get rid of that quickly. I'm going to go to my pen tool, and it's the one that doesn't have a plus or a minus, it's just the pen tool. You can also use P on your keyboard, and that will bring up the pen tool. I'm also going to go over to my stroke, and I want to define the stroke to be about, let's use 1 point, okay? So that's quite a thick, bold stroke. Unfortunately, our line color is actually silver at the moment, which is the same color as this. So what I'm going to do is, not only have I selected my pen tool, and I've selected the line width of, let's say, 1 point, let's do 1.5. I'm then going to go to the color, so I'm going to double click on this stroke here, and I'm going to make it black. Click OK. So now when I draw, you can see we have some black lines. So now what we're going to do is we're going to draw the outline. So I'm going to start off with the high waist. I'm going to click on this point here. I'm going to go to the hip, and you want to use as fewer points as possible. We don't want to kind of do something like this because it would be really ungainly and it would create really non-smooth images. It's probably not a word, but images that aren't very smooth or delicate. So once again, I'm just going to click on this waist point. I'm going to click here, and I'm going to hold down. So I'm clicking and holding. And as you can see, if I click and hold and drag, I can create a curve. Now if I hold down the shift key while I'm clicking and dragging, you'll see it will lock to the diagonal, the horizontal, or the vertical. So I want to lock it to the vertical. So I'm just going to click and drag ever so slightly to create a really nice smooth line. I'm going to come down to about here. You see it's already following that line, which is lovely. I'm going to click and hold and then drag ever so slightly to make a vertical bezier here. I'm then going to go to the next point, which is about here. I'm going to click and drag. This time I'm not going to keep it vertical because I don't want it vertical. I want it to kind of come out to the side ever so slightly. And then we're going to go down to this point. I'm going to click across. And all I'm doing is clicking and drawing. And I'm going to click and hold and just draw a little slight curve here. And then what I'm going to do is, let's go back up. You see, we've actually got this bezier here, which is a bit of a pain. So if you hit the Enter key, what it does is it allows us, we no longer have that line selected, so we can just simply go back in, click on this point, and then we can continue drawing. So I'm just going to do a little curve in there. I'm following the line of my template. That's why these are so handy, because you can use them to do all the hard work when it comes to fashion illustration of the body for you. I'm just going to click and drag, and let's just put some other bits in. So it's always a case of just clicking, and then you can drag to create a nice curve until you're happy. Let's go down the body, and this might take a bit of time. This does take time to get the hang of. You need to find out where you put your points, where you put your marks, like this for example. And then this is a little bit of an odd knee, but I'm going to keep that odd because I want to show you how we can amend and adjust these points as well. So I'm going to click down to the bottom here, click and then a little line. I'm going to hit the Enter key because look, I don't want a line like that. hit the enter key, it allows you to go back to that point, click on it, and then you can draw. Let's go up, this side's not too bad. Let's go up to the hip line, holding down the shift key to create that, remember that vertical, and then up to the waist. Ooh, that's a bit of a bulge there on the side there, that's okay. So now what we do is, so once we have this point, all I need to do is simply click back on my starting point. You can see that the arrow or the pen tool has this little round circle next to it. You see? That just basically means you're joining or linking that whole item there. So now it's one entire piece. So for example, you could fill it with a colour, like that. But I'm going to come to that a bit later. It's just to show you that this is one full item here and you need to join those two pieces together. So let's have a look. There's a few odd bits knocking around. In fact, that doesn't actually look as bad as I thought it did. But let's work with this point here, for example. This is a little bit too extreme. So what I can do is if I go to my small selection tool and I can click on this line just above the point there, and what it does is it brings up this little arrow, the handle, and it allows me to adjust this once again. And what I can do is but you see it's only adjusting the top one. You see that? Not the bottom one. So I can just bring this down ever so slightly, but it still looks a little bit wide. So what I'm going to do is get my small selection tool once again. I'm going to find the point, click on that point, and with my arrow keys I'm going to nudge it in ever so slightly. And I can even nudge it up and down to create a smoother feel. So once again, maybe let's just pull this up a little bit. Or we can always pull it down, just get it right. Okay, also when it comes to leggings blocks, and also when it comes to three-dimensional objects, you don't really want a straight line here. The natural curve of the body is a curve. So what you do is, you can always add points as well. So if you go to your add anchor point, you see that line is now becoming selected or highlighted. It means I'm going to add a point to this location. So there we go. If I add that point there, go to my small selection tool, I can then click on that point and drag it down. I can then drag it up. I can do whatever I want with it. I can even nudge it with my arrow keys. Okay, so all you do is simply click on the point. Let's go back to it. Just want to click on that point with the small selection tool, and then you can nudge it with your arrow keys downwards. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this one here. So this is our anchor point tool, or Shift C. Now what that does is that allows you to click and drag. If there isn't, for example, if there is, see, it's fine if we already have these handles because we drew them in the first place. If we have a square, for example, and it doesn't have any handles, well, how do we add them? You can't just, you can move the point around, but you can't add the handles. So to do that, we go to the Add Anchor Point tool, and we can click on that corner and drag. You see? Really simple. So that's great. So what we do is because we created that point, it doesn't actually have any handles, you see. So what I do is, I'm just going to move that down ever so slightly, and then I go to my Anchor Point tool, click, and then drag, and then let's hold down the Shift key to lock it to the horizontal, and then we have a really nice shaped curved waistline. I hope that makes sense. So it kind of mimics this down here. It just makes it all feel a little bit more three-dimensional. So once again, let's go down to the bottom. You can get your white or small selection or direct selection tool, and you can click on these points and you can move them up. You can move them in or out, whatever you want to do, and just to create a better silhouette. Okay, so that's pretty much the front done. I'm quite happy with that. In fact, to be fair, I think possibly these could come further out ever so slightly. So we've got a bit more of a thigh gap. I mean, these are very over-stylized illustrations. These aren't really realistic, but we all love a good fashion illustration, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to start filling in some of the details. Like, for example, I want some little creases here to make it feel like it's real. I want to put in this knee shaping just so we define that knee line. So to do that, we're still on the same layer, don't forget. We're still on this outline layer. I want to start adding some creases. So to do that, let's go to our pen tool once again, and I'm going to draw them on. So I'm going to click in here, and I'm going to kind of follow the line. I'm going to kind of follow that line just to create a little... There we go. That might be too large, but you know what? We can always bring it in. Get the small selection tool, find that point, click on it, and then just nudge it up and down with your arrows. You can even tweak these, play around them, whatever. So that's a great little crease. It looks quite fun. We could also do something on the opposite side, but maybe not as large. Something a little bit smaller, just to give the impression that there is a crease there. And we can also do the same for the knee. Let's just do a little bit of shaping under here just to show that there's a bit of a knee. I don't know, let's pull it out to here perhaps. You can even take it down to show a bit of the patella bone. I'm not quite sure, my biology is terrible. And then once again here we can kind of follow this. I quite like the look of that. There we go. You could even do that, for example. You can do whatever you want. I'm not sure what I've done with my other ones. Let's have a look. Outline layer. Okay, so I've pretty much done that for these ones, but you can do whatever you want. This one might be more to your liking. But you see, the problem is, because these are creases, you don't want them to be very bold. You want them to be quite light. So for example, if you take a look at that, it looks very chunky. It looks like it's been drawn on a computer, and badly. So what we do is we want to try and refine these lines. So if I go to my big selection tool, I'm going to click on these. I'm going to hold down my shift key. So I'm going to click on it. I'm going to hold down my shift key, click to queue up those selections, like so. So I've got these all selected. I'm going to go to my line tool. I'm going to take this down to about 0.5. And as you can see, look, immediately that looks so much better. We've just reduced the line thickness. Okay? All we do is simply, we select our lines, like so. We then go to the line tool and we just take that point down. Okay? We can take it up and we can take it down as well. So let's make it 0.5, make them quite thin. And we can even, look, add little rounded edges to these corners. Looking lovely. And you know what? I might just add in maybe another crease here perhaps. I don't know, it's up to you. There we go. I mean, that might be a little bit too much. In fact, you know what? It is. Okay, so great. So we've created the front of our block. So we'll use this as a template going forward for all of our designs. Let's just move that in a little bit. It's a little bit. You can always tweak and play with these if you want to. That's looking a bit better. So you know what? I could always trace this back piece, but you know what? They're pretty much the same illustrations. They've actually, I think, been traced and just flipped over. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my big selection tool. I'm going to select all of this. I'm going to go Object and then Group it. So that way when I move it, it comes as one item. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to go Edit, Copy, Edit, Paste. There we go. And what I'm doing is I'm going to flip it, because look, this leg is longer and this leg's shorter. I'm going to go right click, I'm going to go transform, reflect, and I'm going to go vertical and hit OK. And as you can see, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a trace, it's not perfect, but I can always adjust it to make it perfect. So what I do is, once I've transformed it, I can then just nudge it with my keys to get it in a central location. And that looks pretty decent. And then with my small selection tool, the white one, I can just find that point and I can just nudge it out. So basically we've got a little bit more bum on this one, and we can also nudge this out as well. It's a little bit thicker on the front, and I can just trace the lines that we originally had. Let's have a look. This can come out a little bit. So just selecting those points with the small selection tool, I'm just going to move them out ever so slightly. This one can move in. Wow, that one's really out. So let's move that over. Let's move that one over. Yeah, it's not looking too bad. I'm not rushing this, but I'm kind of rushing it a little bit. So you can play around and create a really perfect block if you wish. Okay, also, it's a little bit higher in the bum here, so let's take that up. And let's move those points up a little bit, all the time using my small selection tool. So the small selection tool allows you to select individual elements and components, which means you can then alter them and change them. The big selection tool selects the whole thing. Okay, also we can remove these. So with my small selection tool, I'm going to select this crease. We don't want it. I'm going to hit backspace a few times. Hit backspace a few times. Just going to get rid of these items. And next, I'm going to hit my pen tool. I'm going to start to draw in the bum lines. So I think I'm going to, there we go. I'm going to kind of create a bum line that looks a little bit more like that. It's up to you how you create your bum, whatever you feel is appropriate or whatever looks good, I guess. But you see these kind of interact. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this down ever so slightly. I'm going to pull that in a little bit. Maybe move that up. In fact, you know what? I could even put a point in there. Let's put a point just there. There we go. And let's do the same to the other side. I'm going to place a point here. I'm then going to move it with my small selection tool until it fits there. And I'm just going to remove those handles, like so. There we go. In fact, that thigh gap is very wide on the back. I'm not sure about that. Okay, you can play around with that as much as you like. Okay, so let's also do the creases here. Let's do, that little curve is quite simple and it works quite well. So I'm just using exactly the same kind of techniques that we've done in the first part of this tutorial. Just using that pen tool. So once again, getting the pen tool, click and then drag to create a nice curve. Click on that point, and then click and then drag to create the other bit. Okay, so that's the back, looking really fab. Also, what I would do is I would probably get my small selection tool, I would click on this point and I would move it up to symbolize that it's the back. okay, because this looks more appropriate for the front and more appropriate for the back. Generally in all, let's say, pants blocks or leggings, you lower the front by 2.5 centimeters an inch, and you raise it by 2.5 on the back, just to give a bit more ease. Okay, so this I feel is a little bit too thin to be a bum line, if that makes sense. So let's maybe make it 1. No, let's make it 0.8. So it's slightly thicker than these ones. It's got a bit more definition because it's the bum. So next what we're going to do is we're going to start adding our seams. Okay, so all of our leggings blocks at this point in time come with a center front seam, and also come with a center back seam. So I'm going to get my pen tool, I'm going to click on the center here and click here. Now that's quite a thick line width for our seams, so I'm going to click on this line, hold down the shift key, click on this line, and I'm going to make this 0.5. So let's have a look. These are 0.5 as well. You know what, I'm going to make these, so my little body details and my creases and stuff, I'm going to make those 0.35, so really fine, and I'm going to make my seams 0.5, and I'm going to make my outlines 1 or 1.5. In fact, let's make them 1.25, and then this is 0.8. Okay, so always stick to your definitions. You can always, let's say, small selection tool, click on this line, and then go to dashed line. You can even put a dash there. We could go 5 and 2, and then you've got like a dash seam. I'm not a massive fan of that. I prefer the standard, what do you call it? I prefer these standard seams far more. Okay, so we've pretty much created the outline or the template for all of our leggings, which is looking great. So now I can start adding design details. So let's go back to our other one. So let's add the design details. And also, let me just remove all of this color information so you can see what I mean by design details. So you see how all of these elements here, this is what I'm calling design details. So if I were to basically strip them out, you would see that we have our leggings block. This is the outline that was just created. So next we're going to look at creating the design details, which actually goes into making like our finished leggings pattern, for example. Not pattern, but leggings design. It's the thing that makes our leggings that particular style. Because this could be a pair of leggings, you could change it in so many different ways. So next we're going to work on design details, which kind of like create the foundation of our design, and then we can start adding print and color and stuff to those. Anyway, so yeah, let's create a new layer before we start doing that. So we have our outline layer, we have our template, we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to call this the design details layer. And you know what, we should probably have a capital on the front of that. Design details layer. And I'm going to lock the outline layer. Okay, so now, oh look, nothing. You can't select anything at all. It's not going to get in your way. This is why creating illustrations with layers is really important, because it makes things far simpler. If I were to have these all on one page, I'd have to lock things, I'd have to group them, it would be a nightmare. So layering helps you when it comes to separating your work to make things simpler and also easier to edit later on. Okay, let's work on design details.